Hello. What's up, fellas?
Hello, Sailor. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Sailor. Ed. How are we doing?
Doing great.
Doctor.
Sure.
Any Seinfeld fans?
That was from Spies Like Us.
Crickets. I thought it was Seinfeld.
No, remember?
Didn't they do a spoof on it?
They were coming out of the tent, and he was like, Doctor.
I thought Seinfeld did a spoof on it in the elevator. Am I wrong?
Maybe.
No, I think
I don't
Ed's
know.
right. Actually, I think that Ed's right.
I'm wrong. Who cares?
Yeah, that's fine. There's
Joke
too many
fail.
There's
Forget
too many
it.
Seinfeld-isms
I'm
anyway
out.
to
I'm
keep
out.
track
I'm
of.
not staying tonight. Just don't like get my jokes wrong. How you
Right out
guys
of the
doing?
gate.
What's
Doing
happening?
good.
Doing good. Doing well.
Yeah. Well, we're back again, and we are going to be sticking to the series, unlike our hair metal series.
We will get back to it eventually.
The
we promise.
ultimate joke forever.
Sometime.
So I guess this series is still in a pause of our hair metal series. Dun dun dun. I'm really excited about tonight's topic, and I am very excited about the whiskey that I'm drinking that I'm going to be talking about. But before we get into that, Ed, do you want to share with the people that didn't listen to the last episode what the hell we're doing tonight?
Okay, well, what we're doing, we're revisiting the subject of Metallica that kicked everything off for this podcast. And tonight we are going to do a bit of a deeper dive into their first three albums, those being Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets.
Yes. So we kind of touched on all of them last week. We talked about our previous attempt to tackle this subject. And the goal here is to dive a little bit deeper into why we had the feelings we did, see if we feel differently about it, and kind of explain the reasoning. And I have a really cool article we're going to talk about that is connected to all of this. But before that, Matt, any current news? I know we did sadly lose someone in the music world that was actually very important to this band we're talking about
Very
tonight.
important to this band, and it's one of those weird things that I know it's happened before on the show where we plan on talking about a subject, or we begin talking about a subject, and someone that's related to that subject passes away, and we end up doing tribute shows and all that stuff. So, but yeah, Marcia Zazula, who was Johnny Z's wife, famously of Megaforce Records, who were instrumental in getting bands like Metallica and Anthrax their first big breaks. Sadly passed away. I believe she was 68 years old. Just really, really sad. And it's one of those people in the industry that is so vitally important, although the name might not always be on the tip of your tongue. But, there was a lot of heartfelt tributes that came out. James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Scott Ian from Anthrax, all pretty much described her as a mother figure to all of them, the way that she took care of them and cooked the meals and all that stuff. So unfortunately, again, leading off the news with a very, very sad passing.
That's definitely a bummer. And, these days, I find 68 to be way too young. So that's, really unexpected. But she was a hell of a lady. I was just like you, I was reading stories from, a lot of the bands that had been on Megaforce when they were just starting out, and she sounded like just a phenomenal person. And I saw a lot of, when a lot of them were talking about her cooking for them. I mean, did that when I had my small label and touring company in Belgium. And you do feel like a mom, and you have to tell them to change their socks and change their underwear. And so I could relate to a lot of the stories.
Lars, change your underwear.
I don't know if it was him or not, but I had a few where I was like, okay, if everybody doesn't change their socks and put on clean socks, I'm going to find out who's wearing the stinky socks. And this one, you go put on deodorant. This one, you don't go home with girls tonight because we can't find you the next day. Did you eat all of your food? Yeah. So what else is in the news?
So There are a couple of birthdays, but before I get to that, I wanted to bring up something interesting that I read. We all know who Trent Reznor is.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
He is aside from being in well, I'm just throwing it out there. Aside from being, the lead singer of Nine Inch Nails, of course, he is also big into doing scores and composing for movies as well. And he recently just did a score for the movie Mank. I guess it's a biopic about a famous director from the 30s or 40s. And I stumbled upon an article from MSN where he sat down with them and talked about the struggles of composing a score during a pandemic. I will be the first to admit that, I've shit on a lot of Hollywood elite in the past. The movie industry is taking a huge hit along with every other major, industry that we've talked about on the show. But it's the people that we might not think of, the, people in the orchestra, the people, the editors, the, all the smaller little parts that make a great movie that we might not think of that are out of work. Mm-hmm. And the way he describes how they had to piece this score together is just absolutely fascinating and pretty innovative if you think about it, where they had to pretty much just, record one piece, mail it to the next person, have them record that, mail it to the next person. And we're talking about an orchestra here, not just a couple of people in a band. So I found it very fascinating. You guys can Google that. I think it's on msn.com. Yeah, it was a very interesting read about how they put this score together. Yeah.
Imagine, this goes back to, we had this discussion years ago about, going back to live recordings where the band's all being in one room together as opposed to separate sound booths and things like that, because you need that energy, you need that magic, you need that feeling. There's so much more to music than just technically getting it correct. You've got to, I hate to use this word, but vibe with each other. And what an absolutely stunning challenge. But I have to say, somebody who, who's into, lack of a better word, electronica, I think he's a great fit for something like that. I don't know if that's why he was tasked with this, or if it was probably I don't know, but I don't know if it was chosen before the pandemic. But gosh, hats off to all those musicians who
hats off to the editor
remotely.
Putting it together.
Oh my God.
Everybody. Everybody. And I see Gary Oldman is starring in this. And is there seriously any other actor that is? I think he is the ultimate chameleon ever in the history of the world.
Oh my God, yeah.
He is
he's up there for sure.
I'm obsessed with him. Oh my God, I used to be so
Winston
in love with
Churchill, anyone?
That was
Harvey Oswald.
Yeah. Everything. Yeah, he's incredible. I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm really interested in hearing the soundtrack now, because that's pretty stunning.
And keep in mind, it's a composition that has to be to the time. So you're talking 1930s, 1940s music. So I'm sure there's some swing in there, and some other.
Big band era stuff.
Big band, thank you. Yeah. So I just found it absolutely fascinating the way that they piece this together. Little things like that you take for granted when you talk about how different industries are affected. Mm-hmm. But let's end on a slightly high note. So there are 2 big birthdays today in the rock industry. Yes. So we have Rob Zombie, who is turning 56 today. Wow. Yes. I know. I saw that and I'm like, God damn.
Yep.
God damn. Yeah. And then Zach De La Roca from Rage Against the Machine, who is 51.
Don't tell me he's 56.
No, he's 51. Yeah.
Oh.
Still not great. Can't believe. Oh God. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Not time just keeps moving.
That old yet.
Yeah. Pandemic or not, time moves on.
Yep.
It's not fair. We should get an extra year
Yeah.
for this past year.
I second
and
that.
this coming year.
Yeah.
I mean, the return policy on fucking 2021 has expired, unfortunately, but I would have returned the hell out of this shit.
We need a do-over.
Not
but,
a great
not
start.
going to happen.
Yeah.
We need to push the reset button on the whole fucking world.
Yeah. It was only a 5-day return policy, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Usually it's 30 or something, but I guess 5 days.
Yeah. We didn't get very long.
No.
Unfortunately, I have to once again do a toast before we talk about what we're drinking and get into tonight's topic. I lost another wonderful, beautiful human being in my life. The father of a very dear friend. And he's one of those guys who was everybody's dad. The minute he met you, he was your dad. That he was just one of these guys. And he had this smile. He would talk to anybody. And he was just, I can't imagine him having an enemy in the world. John E. Waters III of Wilmington, Massachusetts. He was a loving husband. Him and Dee were married forever. A father to Aaron and Mike, a biker, a big spirits lover. He had a winning smile. I loved seeing that in his obituary because it was true. I have some really funny memories of him. My friends Aaron and Jay got married in New Orleans. I don't know if you guys remember when I drove down to New Orleans from Ohio by myself. You remember that trip for the wedding? It was a hell of a time.
Yeah, the wedding.
Yep. So it was just a small group, couple of friends and Aaron's parents, and we were out the second day, and John was having his first hurricane, and they're cheesy drinks, but you got to do it. When you go to New Orleans for the first time, you got to do it. He just thought, I can't. It's hard to explain his shock and joy at just seeing what it was like to walk around the streets with a drink in your hand and all these bars, and it was really fun. It's fun to see things through people's eyes like that, because now when I go to New Orleans, I'm like, ugh, this is disgusting. I don't want to go anywhere near the French Quarter, and bleh, and it's party central. I'm not 17 anymore, but I had such a good time because I was just watching him, and it was just so much fun. And it's really sad that he passed, and my heart goes out to everybody. And it's a fucking bummer. But once again, I will raise my glass to John. He was just an amazing, incredible human being. So if you would please, when you're listening to this, raise your glass and do a toast for John.
Cheers.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Let's continue, shall we?
Let's do it.
So, you want me to go? Or you guys want to go first? It's up to you.
Oh, so this is the part where we talk about what we're drinking.
Glad to have you back, Matt.
Yes.
Hey,
Sorry.
Matt, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
I have a lot of windows open here. I'm trying to navigate through these rough seas here. But yeah, and then I'm reminded that we're also on YouTube, so it's not like you can, yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, this is the part, as I said, that we go around and we talk about what we have in our glass. After all, it is Metal Rock and Whiskey. Whiskey, the third word, but not the least important by far. So Who wants to go first? I guess Sailor, since you volunteered.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm responsible for this segment tonight. And I decided to go with a whiskey that I think is definitely, definitely a rock star in craft distilling. And this is Distillery 291. They're an award-winning small batch whiskey distillery, and they are in Colorado Springs. So they say that their distillery sits in the shadow of Pikes Peak. So their founder is his story is really interesting. First of all, his name is Michael Myers. I mean, come on. I mean, there's so many cool Michael Myers. And he's a former New York City fashion and beauty photographer. But he always had a passion for whiskey and the Old West. He actually grew up on rural farms in Georgia and Tennessee. And he was really close to in between Jack Daniels and George Dickel in Tennessee. These were his family farms growing up. So, you know, whiskey's definitely in his blood. Okay. Just because he ended up being a fashion photographer in New York City doesn't mean he does actually come from whiskey country. Right. But he really just he has this like romanticized view of the Wild West and managed to create something exactly, I think, like what was in his head. And so the three words that they use are rugged, refined, and rebellious. And I'll touch on that in a minute. So he had this vision of a cowboy walking into a bar saying, "Give me a whiskey," and the bartender slamming down the bottle. And when the bartender slammed down that bottle, it would be 291 Colorado whiskey. So this is the movie he's playing for himself in his head. So he built his original still from copper, I'm going to say this wrong, photograver plates that he once used to create photographic scenes from Western landscapes all the way to the Chrysler Building. So this is pretty bonkers. It's pretty cool process. And there's more about this if you Google them. And then on September 11th, 2011, 10 years after 9/11 changed his life, being a New York resident and the lives of so many other, of course, he pulled his first whiskey off of the still. And that was it. That was his future. So 291 Colorado whiskey is handmade the Colorado way, they say. So they distill, they're grain to bottle. Everything is done by hand from scratch, including milling their own grain. They use grains from the Colorado Plains. Their water comes from Pikes Peak Reservoir. And it's just, I mean, their awards they've racked up as a small craft distillery is pretty incredible. So they're kind of, the way they talk about it is that they're kind of straddling the line of history and modern. And I love that. So tonight I'm drinking the 291 small batch Colorado bourbon finished with aspen wood staves. It's no age statement, copper pot distilled, and they say they heavily char their barrels and then they use local aspen staves, like I said. And you've got corn, rye, and malted barley, 50% ABV, 100 proof. So their process is, so they mill all of their grain by hand and put it into their corn cooker. And then their mash is soured in open air fermenters before it's distilled 3 times in their locally made pot stills. Their whiskeys are aged in American white oak barrels, and those toasted aspen staves, I can tell you can taste it in the whiskey, which is really interesting. And it's the aspen is actually harvested from a friend's piece of property nearby. Even cooler. So they kind of talk about that. So so there's the rugged, right? I said there's the 3 R's. The rugged is them milling their own grain and their unique mashing process. Refined is using the virgin heavily charred oak barrels. And then the rebellious is their unique proprietary process, which takes secondary stillage and adds it to the mash. So they say that's their Colorado twist on the traditional process that incorporates a fraction of the last stillage into each new batch. And they call it, no, I can't talk tonight. And they call it the El Paso County process. So this whiskey, you guys know already, I have a love for craft whiskey. So when I'm drinking this, I am not expecting something that's been aged for 8 years. I'm not expecting something that's been blended in with 12 years. I'm not expecting a 15-year scotch. I am expecting a young whiskey that's artfully crafted. It's a different taste, it's a different expectation, and there's plenty of room in the category of whiskey for craft whiskey. So if you're going to pick up this bottle and expect it to taste like something that's been aged for 6 to 8 to 10 years, don't bother, okay? Expect it to be exactly what it is: new, young, innovative, and different. And that is exactly what this is. So a couple things about the bottle. These bottles are freaking gorgeous. And they use the champagne style corks. Can you see the, I love that. I just think it's, again, it's such a unique, cool detail. So they have a beautiful range, really creative stuff that they're doing. I definitely taste Colorado in this. I lived in Colorado Springs for a summer when I was in my youth, and I know exactly what they mean by Colorado whiskey the minute I tasted it. I didn't quite know what they meant before, but now that I've tasted it, I do. So you definitely still get the young, what am I looking for? Like that new grain, that new oak taste. Some people call it like glue, but not in a bad way. We've got to come up with some better terms, because there's not a lot of people that are doing whiskey reviews that give favorable views for a lot of the craft, which is bullshit in my opinion. But there's so much.
True.
Someone should just do craft whiskey and review nothing but that, and fully immerse themselves in understanding what a different category it is. It's its own category. So for me, it's, there's so much wood in it. There's so much character in it. I get tons of vanilla, which you would, it's young. But it's really clean, super clean. I think that's one of the first things that came to my mind is it's clean and it's bright. There's a heaviness to it, and I don't mean in its viscosity. I mean in its flavor. It's, I can tell it's been heavily charred, and there's those aspen staves, but it's also bright. So it's kind of, you're getting two things. I don't know how to explain it. It's still new to me. I haven't been drinking it for very long, so I'll come up with better descriptives as I go through it and become more comfortable with it. But it's really, really exciting. I think they're definitely going to be doing big things. I mean, the awards they've won has been fantastic. They're super committed to their process. I love that. So, if you happen to see this 291 out on the shelf, I would highly recommend picking it up and educating yourself on the craft category, because if you're not drinking craft, you're really missing out, and you're really not doing American whiskey any favors. We need our craft distilleries desperately, and right now they need your support more than ever, because COVID has really kicked their asses. So next time you buy a bottle of something old, grab a bottle of craft too. And if you don't like it now, I've said this before, doesn't matter. Hold on to the bottle and go back in a year, go back in 2 years. Keep going back and trying their whiskey, because they're new and they're just getting started. Give them an opportunity. And next time I bring them up on the show, we're going to talk about their white whiskeys, because as you know, you guys, I'm obsessed with that category. So that is my whiskey pairing for tonight. I think, like I said, I think it's fucking rock and roll. And that's why I chose it for tonight. They're young, new rockers, just like where Metallica was in the periods we're going to be discussing tonight.
All right.
Boom.
Sounds great. I'm going to have to check
Awesome.
that out.
Yeah.
For sure. I've had a Breckenridge bourbon, but that's the only Colorado bourbon I think I've ever had.
Does Breckenridge do their own distillation, or did they when you drank it?
I think so, but I can't, stake my life on it.
Does it taste really
I
young?
believe it's their own distillate.
I think they do.
I mean, it's pretty young. They're a craft distillery.
And the
like we were
Stranahan
saying.
too, which
Stranahan.
yeah.
But that's
Love
a single malt. Yeah, I
They're single
actually
malt,
have had Stranahans, and actually my brother-in-law drove out to Colorado just to do a bottling. Be on the bottling assembly line with them. Yeah. So
is your
that's how much
brother?
he
Does
likes.
he live in Illinois as well?
My brother-in-law? Yeah, he does live in Illinois as well.
Okay, it's not too far from you guys though. That's not too crazy. I would do
that's
right?
That's a hell of a drive. That's got to be at least
It's
an
far,
8-hour
so,
drive.
Yeah.
8
And
hours? That's nothing. Get out of here.
Well, for someone who drives from Boston to Washington State,
8 hours is nothing.
Yeah, 8 hours. I'm still in the same state, for Christ's sakes.
I know, right?
Almost. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right.
definitely. Yeah, Breckenridge. Stranahan's is phenomenal. Big fan. What about you guys?
Well, something not quite as youthful. Well, actually, I don't know how old it actually is, but there is no age statement on it. But the person it represents is definitely not a whippersnapper. I actually killing a bottle here tonight. Killing a bottle
Kill.
of
We need a
Elmer
button
T.
for that,
Lee,
Ed.
if you can see it on the. So yeah, this is a bottle. This goes back to our first year recording. This is one of the first bottles I was drinking on one of our very earlier episodes, and here it is, getting rid of it. And I did sacrifice the last dram to my infinity bottle.
There you go.
And
So I have a question. Do you do your infinity bottle just anything in there, or do you have it separated by categories?
So far, I've got here. Let me look real quick.
I like
separate mine. Yeah.
I
right.
can't.
So
What the hell is that
actually,
gonna taste like?
it's bourbon right now. It's all bourbons,
just
and I
bourbon.
think I'm going to keep it that way.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah. So
you could add a
so
little
far,
rye in there, maybe, but
I've got Elijah Craig, Rock Hill Farms, which is a relative of Elmer T. Lee, and a local craft distillery bourbon, Whiskey Acres straight bourbon, and then a little bit of Elmer T. Lee. And that's just the start. So that's going to be interesting to see how it evolves.
I have to do it in categories. I can't throw just anything in them. It freaks me out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I should start another one of just ryes.
Yeah, like bourbons,
ryes,
ryes, scotch, and then you can take, and I have a craft one, of course, an American single malt. Then you can first taste it when you're done. Is it good? What if it's complete garbage? And then you can kind of play with blending it. Oh, maybe this bourbon infinity bottle needs 5% rye. You can add your infinity rye in there.
Yeah, start mixing the two infinity bottles together.
It's so awesome.
It goes on forever and ever and ever.
Yes, that's the point.
Keep mixing.
You've got your own blend.
Yeah,
we should do that, you guys. We should make a metal rock and whiskey blend.
We should.
That would be
okay.
Cool.
So I'll do the blackened, since I'll do just pure blackened. And then I'll do a secondary bourbon, and then one of you guys has to do a rye. And then what else should we put with it? I don't like wheated whiskey usually. Although, I don't know. I don't think I would want to mix American single malt with it, though.
No, I got plenty of rye, though.
So someone do the secondary bourbon. I'll do the rye, and I'll do the blackened.
All right, we'll discuss this later.
Blackened base. Coming to a liquor store near you in 7 years.
Yeah.
But as a backup, since I'm down to just this, I'll finish this. I do have a bottle from the same distillery, bottle of Eagle Rare, and if you know my history with Eagle Rare. The first
Are you
bottle
actually drinking that?
This is a single barrel. It's a barrel pick that was picked by a restaurant that one of my daughters works at, and called Hoppy Pig, and it is actually a fantastic pick, which is why I purchased it. I was able to sample it from a friend who had one of these bottles, and it was good, so I went out and got myself one.
So no toothpaste.
No charcoal toothpaste in this one. But funny thing, though, I did go to a friend's house recently. He had a bottle of the standard off-the-shelf Eagle Rare, and I got that same note again, that charcoal
that's your
toothpaste. No, I didn't know.
for sure.
Yeah.
That's you. Interesting.
So, anyway. But yeah, good stuff, though, this bottle, anyway. So, yeah, I guess if once this is gone, I'm going to have to keep seeking out those barrel picks.
Yeah, if that's the only one you can drink. I mean, I love Eagle Rare, but yeah, the whole charcoal toothpaste thing was no bueno.
How about you, Matt?
To bring it back around to craft distilleries, I have been on a spending spree of buying different Balcones expressions. We've talked about them before on the show many times. I think I'm up to 9 bottles is what I counted last time. Different expressions, yeah. So tonight, I couldn't choose one. So I am the meat in a Balcones sandwich here between 2 bottles. A ménage à trois of craft beauty right here. So yeah, I'll make it quick since I have 2 here. But the first one is Balcones Mirador, which is a yearly release from them. It is a single malt, a blend of malt whiskeys, but single malt because it comes from one distillery. And they don't use new charred oak. They use it's not refill oak, but I guess it's used American oak. So the color on it is much lighter. The profile is much lighter comparatively to a lot of the other things that they make. But it's about 54.2%, I believe. 56.2, sorry. But it is so light. It's one of the lightest things that they've made as far as body goes and texture and mouthfeel. Big on honey. You get some orchard fruit in there as well, which is a staple of them from a lot of the things I've seen, the apricots, the peaches, but this one's a little bit more like Granny Smith apples. Really, really just great stuff. It's only aged about 3 years. Again, we're talking youth, we're talking vibrancy. So that is number 1. Number 2 is a little bit of a different animal. It's the Texas Blue Corn Bourbon, which it's 100% blue corn. Pot distilled, obviously, 64.5% ABV. When I popped this bottle and I took a whiff of it, it did not. You would not, if you poured this in a glass and smelled it, you would never think it was anywhere near 64%. It has a unbelievable, just buttered popcorn sweetness to it on the nose, where you would say it's probably 90 proof if you had to guess just from smelling it. But you get sort of like an earthy saltiness. The corn is there big time. It is 100% blue corn. But you know, coming through, the sweetness, but that earthiness stays the whole way. It's an unbelievably unique bottle. I believe they were the first ones to use blue corn. I know that there are a couple other distillers out there that use it now. Interesting little fact that they originally, when they first started distilling in 2008, they were sourcing their blue corn from a local Hopi tribe, which I found very fascinating. But they have been doing it for a little over a decade now, and I am falling in love with every single bottle that I buy. I cannot say enough great things about them. And for all of you, and we talked about it last week, that are stuck on the age statement, get over it, because there is nothing that they make that is more than 3 years old. I mean, honestly.
Hallelujah.
And like I try to tell my customers, sometimes with youth comes vibrancy. Taste it, and you will be thoroughly impressed. And I'm thoroughly impressed with every sip that I take. Fantastic
that
stuff.
Blue corn is also, I'm right there with you, Matt. I am obsessed with it. I think I tasted, what was that, 2 years ago, I think, was when I got those bottles and fell in love with Balcones. And oh my gosh, that it's very special. In specific, that blue corn is very, very special. You're absolutely right, and I adore that stuff. It's so delicious. Should definitely try it. Take our recommendation.
Yes.
Well, cheers once again, everybody. I'm going to play a little song, and then we're going to get into our discussion. Tonight, it's all about early Metallica. We're talking first 3 released albums, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets. So here's a song first, and then we will get into it. Okay, so I want to talk about an article before we get into the discussion, okay? So I came across this article. A friend sent it to me a couple years ago. Neural Nostalgia. Why Do We Love the Music We Heard as Teenagers by Mark Joseph Stern. You can find it on Slate. So researchers have uncovered evidence that suggests our brains bind us to the music we heard as teenagers more tightly than anything we'll hear as adults, a connection that doesn't weaken as we age. Music nostalgia, in other words, isn't just a cultural phenomenon, it's a neuronic command. And no matter how sophisticated or our taste may get, our brains may stay jammed on those songs we obsessed over during the high drama of adolescence. So I'm just taking a few excerpts out of this article. I highly recommend reading it. It's so fantastic and explains so much. If anybody reading this, especially if you're over 30, 35, you don't go, yes, this is me. Something's wrong with you. So when we first hear a song, it stimulates our auditory cortex and we convert the rhythms, melodies, and harmonies into a coherent whole. From there, our reaction to music depends on how we interact with it. Sing along to a song in your head, and you'll activate your premotor cortex, which helps plan and coordinate movements. Dance along, and your neurons will synchronize with the beat of the music. Pay close attention to the lyrics and instrument, and you'll activate your parietal cortex, which helps you shift and maintain attention to different stimuli. Listen to a song that triggers personal memories, and your prefrontal cortex, which maintains information relevant to your personal life and relationships, will spring into action. So brain imaging studies have shown that our favorite songs stimulate the brain's pleasure circuit, which releases an influx of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, and other neurochemicals that make us feel good. The more we like a song, the more we get treated to this neurochemical bliss, flooding our brains with some of the same neurotransmitters that cocaine chases after. Okay. So the reason I bring this up tonight is nothing to do with cocaine, but it has everything to do with our opinions on music, and especially music that we grew up with. So when I listened, so when we decided we were going to do this, we all together went back and listened to the first time we tackled the subject of Metallica. And I was specifically listening to ask myself, do I disagree with what I was saying? Has my opinion changed for some reason? Would I still feel the same way and say the same things? And at first pass, I said yes. I kept going, yes, exactly, to myself. I know. But then I listened a second time and I was like, but why? Why? Why do I feel that way? Why do I feel so strongly about classic Metallica versus new Metallica? And then I meet younger kids who are now in their 20s that also grew up with Metallica, but a different Metallica, and they feel so strongly about new Metallica. This article explains all of that, in my opinion. So there's first of all, I mean, who the fuck are we? Nobody. I'm no like professional music reviewer. I'm not a professional musician. Do I have the right to have an informed opinion about whether Lars is a great drummer or a shitty drummer? No, of course I don't. But that's not what the point of this podcast. We're just having fun here. And all the flack I took about, you know, from my opinions on Metallica comes from this emotional place. So early Metallica gives me all of those things that this article described, all of those good cocaine vibes, apparently. New Metallica does not do that for me. So, and there's a lot of reasons why. Number one, I had a very difficult childhood growing up, and I was one of those kids in the 80s that relied on heavy music to save me. And it's a real deal thing. And there was a study that came out, I don't know, a year or so ago, and Dee Snider and I had a conversation about it on Twitter about Generation X and the metalheads, and we are some of the most well-together people on the planet. The exact opposite of what we were told we were going to turn out like for listening to the devil's music. Because we were using a form of art to release our stress and our anxiety and our pain and our fear and all of the things that go with being a teenager, but perhaps you didn't have a great childhood either. And it was a healthy, now we know, constructive way to get out a lot of your angst, just like sports does. It was really either sports or music. You know, I mean, I think it's still that way. What's the best way to keep kids active and get all the, you know, we call it all the energy and, you know, all of that out. And then when you're a teenager, the emotions and the hormones, and the best way to deal with that is music or sports. And I was just, you know, I did both, but music was it for me. So when I got to an age where, you know, my life had changed and I was living on my own and I wasn't consumed with all the teenage angst and stress and trauma all the time, I didn't really need that as much anymore. And it just so happened to be the same time that Metallica's sound changed. Now, I've beat them up a lot for that change in sound, as we know on this podcast. I'm doing it very, very much in jest, but it also comes from a place of truth for me, because who doesn't want some things to stay the same? Like, let's be real. Am I right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
And Sailor, you had a great quote from one of our first Metallica episodes. I wrote it down here because I thought it was a great quote that pretty much sums up what you're saying right now. And you said, I wouldn't hate them so much if I didn't love them so much.
It's true, right?
It's true.
What do they say about hating your enemies?
Yes.
You can't hate unless a person that you know, unless you once liked them or cared for them, right? Why would you just hate someone you know nothing about? I think it also has a lot to do with our personal experiences. So, you know, we didn't go deep into that the first time because that wasn't really what our point was, you know. So I get to have my opinions. I get to voice my opinions. It's my podcast and we're just having fun here. We're not, you know, doing brain surgery. But I do want to reflect, and I'm a human being. So naturally I grow and I change, and hopefully I'm evolving every day, every week, every month, every year. We all are. And opinions can change as we learn more or we're exposed to different things. That's an important lesson since 2016 to right now for a lot of people. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change your opinion. It's okay to say I was wrong, or I was right then. I'm also going to be right now. A little bit has changed, or I have a different view. That's totally okay. And I think we as a society need to get more comfortable with that. So am I going to change all of my opinions and everything I said? No. But I wanted to just give more important context to why I feel so strongly about this band and why their change affected me so. Now, one of the things that I did not talk about was the loss of Cliff. And I think Jake, I think you brought it up too, Matt. Like, kind of defending them with Injustice for All, and we're going to save that for the next show, but I didn't really get into that. We're not going to get into that tonight, but I just wanted to talk about this a little bit because I thought the article was this fantastic explanation about why we feel the way we do about music from our youth, and that's very connected to the subject tonight. But let's see, you guys, if we feel any differently than we did previously when we talk about these 3 albums, which we'll call these the Cliff albums. Shall we?
Okay.
All right, we're going to start with Kill 'Em All.
Getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah,
it's on my mind because I downloaded the movie. We're going to talk about Kill 'Em All, which was released on June 25th, 1983. We discussed we kind of touched on it quickly last week and talked about all the other things that were released, movies and music and other albums. But, this is their debut studio album. And 1983 is a really important year in music. So this was released through Megaforce. And at the time, they're just doing club shows in LA. They had not moved. Well, then they moved to San Francisco when they finally got Cliff to agree to join them. This is a big, huge moment in the life of this band. So I love that their signing budget was $15,000. That wouldn't even get you an hour probably in a studio right now, or marketing or anything.
Not much.
So the album was recorded with producer Paul Curcio. I don't know. In Rochester, New York. Curcio in Rochester, New York. And it was supposed to be titled Metal Up Your Ass. We have discussed album art in the past, and censorship and things like that. And as a matter of fact, quick side note, you should go Google and look up the video of Dee Snider making a statement about censorship in the 1980s in front of Congress. It is still applicable today, unfortunately. But the documentary about it is so fascinating. Just remembering this mania of, censoring these albums. And then every kid, they're literally interviewing musicians today and kids like, well, yeah, the minute I saw that it had parental advisory, I was like, I'm buying that. If it didn't have parental advisory, I was like, nobody wants that. So everybody gravitated towards the parental advisory. So it did the opposite, assholes. Anyway, so they changed the name, of course, because they couldn't put metal up your ass. Can you imagine these days? So they called it Kill 'Em All. Let's talk about our feelings about this album, because we were very torn, and our task at the time, just to go back, was we had to put this up against it was Kill 'Em All up against Ride the Lightning, and we had very strong feelings about why we all pretty much agreed. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right, the floor is yours, guys.
Well, I was new to this album not that many years ago, coming into Metallica a little bit later than Sailor did. I won't rehash that whole story, but suffice to say, so most of a few of the songs on here I had heard in the past, like the big ones probably, Whiplash, Seek and Destroy, Four Horsemen, maybe Motor Breath, but possibly that's not like one I really remember seeing a lot or listening to a lot in the past, but much at all. But interesting because I just got this album just a few years ago. I think it was probably right before we did our first Metallica episode, and I bought this album just so I could really spend some time with it. But the funny thing is about it, my favorite song on this album I had never heard before. Got the album, and it's not one that I really hear mentioned or talked about or heard on the radio, but it's a song "No Remorse." For some reason, just the guitar riff, the pound dun, 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 that guitar I just love, and I can really get into that. But yeah, the album is very raw, which actually I think adds to its charm. And it's as a debut album for even though it's not as polished as what would come, I'd say there's definitely something that any metal band. It's an album that any metal band would be proud to put out as their first album, for sure. So have my feelings changed towards it since our last episode? Maybe not too much. I do think that I have, of course, listened to it many more times since that, and I can appreciate it more now. And I think that even though I appreciate it more, overall, my feelings are still basically the same towards it. Yeah, I don't know what else to say other than we're not talking about Ride the Lightning, so I don't want to spend too much time comparing it to Ride the Lightning, but it's a great example of a band that's off to a good start, and that will definitely have better things to come. But yeah, I guess my feelings have changed a little bit. I do enjoy the album more now than I did then, just because for the amount of times I've listened to it. But I still kind of stand on this in relation to what will come.
Okay. So one of the things that was said by Jake previously, and he's not here, of course, to talk about it, but was it, it was really Ride the Lightning that set them apart from the rest of the thrash bands at the time. And when I went back and thought about it and I listened to it, and I'm like, I completely have to disagree. So for me, that has changed. I think Seek and Destroy, and I said multiple times, I can't part with that song, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know. Still, I'm still struggling. It's interesting to hear you say that your feelings have changed a little bit, Ed, because I kind of had a feeling that would happen as you familiarize yourself with the album more. Definitely. Matt, what about you?
My feelings about the album, the album itself haven't really changed. I still love it. I still think it's a shitload of fun to listen to. It's important for the time and when it came out. Absolutely groundbreaking, as I think we all agree at the time it was groundbreaking. The thing that's changed for me is that in the past, I've always seen this as the first step in a progression towards something greater, toward an apex is a word I used in one of our earlier episodes. But going back and listening to it again and again and again, as I have many times since the first time we talked about it, I always put And Justice for All in its own little bubble. It's its own album between two different phases of this band. And I kind of now put this album in its own little bubble as not being like the first step in a progression, but a completely separate sort of entity. And sound-wise, yes, I think that Mustaine's stamp is still very much all over this album.
Oh, yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, for sure.
Which
makes it great.
Which
and
makes it great. Exactly.
To your point, Matt, I think that's what makes it unique. I'm so glad you just said that. If you don't mind interjecting in its own bubble. I think that's what has been bothering me since we did 2-3 years ago, whatever the hell it was, 3 years ago. I think that's what's been bothering me, that we put these two albums up against each other was wrong. And that's why I wanted to do it differently. And why I kept saying, gosh, I can't part with this album. I can't part with this album. I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's because this is a Mustaine album.
Yeah.
In a way, right? And I think that's the uniqueness of it. Like, let's not talk about the production, because that's just unfair to judge an album like that in so many ways, I think, is because, first of all, you're young, you're new, no one's spending a lot of money on you, and sometimes that's just literally what it's about, is money, right?
Yeah.
Or technology has changed, which happened to them. Both things happened to them, actually, right? Yeah. So I'm just really happy you said that, because I feel the same way. And the Mustaine all over this, I think this album should get to have its own shelf.
Yeah, and weirdly, maybe it's not related, but it just made me think of this, is that the last time we saw them live, which was, I think, it was recent. It was very recent. That they, performed a lot of the Black Album stuff and a lot of the Hardwired, a lot of the new stuff that, we're probably not going to talk as much about. But, even when they went to Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, the entire crowd was going nuts. And, when they hit Whiplash, which I went nuts for because they don't really play it that much anymore.
Yeah. I would lose my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And the younger people, and I'm talking, when I say younger people, I mean my age and younger, they kind of didn't really know, like they weren't going as crazy. But then all of a sudden you have these little pockets of, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but these guys who were they had like the cut off denim vests with the patches all over, and they had they're bald, but they have the rat tail in the back, and they're like going completely ape shit over this. And I realized that these are the guys that felt that they sold out when they made Fade to Black. Like like their allegiance ended after Kill 'Em All. And I'm like, holy shit. Like that put it in a bubble. That put it in more of a bubble for me when I saw that reaction to Whiplash and Seek and Destroy. And I think they might have played the Four Horsemen too. Like they were only going nuts for those songs. Yes. Nothing else in a 3-hour show. And that kind of put it in perspective for me too. So I still love the album, but its impact on their career in that timeline is different for me.
Okay. I love this. This is making me really happy. So this is what we're going to do with Kill 'Em All. Kill 'Em All does not go up against anything. There's no up against anything with this album. Kill 'Em All is its own unique entity in the history of this band, which is a huge qualifier in the history of American thrash metal. Period.
I second that. I agree that the Mustaine angle, I don't know why we didn't really focus in on that before. But
I know.
You're exactly right, because that's, I think, is what sets this album apart, is the sound, the guitar sound is just so different. And man, I meant to bring this up in the last episode, and I forgot to say it, but 1983, that's probably the year, I believe, that I really discovered hard rock and metal.
Mm-hmm,
and
same.
If only someone had played this album for me then, who knows? Sailor, I'd probably be right with you with everything else you've been saying.
I didn't discover this album until Kill 'Em All, because I was still a little too young in 83. But when Kill 'Em All, 1 year is, when you're a kid, it's a big deal. And so I think it was at the end of the year of Kill 'Em All. And then someone said, the end of Ride the Lightning, and someone said, "Oh, Kill 'Em All," and I listened to it, I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" Yeah.
But instead, I was listening to, and probably why this is some of my favorite music, like we were saying, Def Leppard's Pyromania album was new out that time.
Yes.
So early Def Leppard is, that's some stuff that I can definitely get into. Yeah.
I love this.
To each his own.
I'm so glad that we did this because these are the things that were bugging me. We absolutely did not give enough credit to Dave Mustaine's unique sound.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because I'm going to speculate and speak for all of us, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that we just assume it's a known thing because it's now and it's not then, right? That we all know Mustaine's sound so well, and we know that, what his impact was on this album. But it was unfair to leave that out, and I think it was very, very unfair to put these two albums up against each other. Even though this podcast was designed to battle albums against each other, and this was the whole discussion that started the podcast, I want to end this by saying that's just not possible with this album. It's its own thing.
Yeah.
So it goes on this shelf. Awesome. Okay. Love it.
Yeah, because that explains a lot. Because to me, Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets seem more like counterparts than either of those in this, for sure.
I will somewhat agree, but we'll get to that. So we're gonna end this part of the discussion by talking for a minute about Seek and Destroy. I'm gonna ask everybody to do just a little Google search on, just put in Seek and Destroy, and I want you to put in Deconstructed, and I want you to see what comes up. Some really smart people who have way more musical knowledge than I do, and technical knowledge, will tell you, and we all seem to agree, that this song is really, really, really what was the catalyst for American thrash metal to move past just being an underground entity. There are plenty of genres that never really make it and break out, and this song is absolutely one of the catalysts for that. So I just want that song to have its rightful place in history. So, all right.
I mean, there's a reason they close most of their shows with it.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly. You. No, it's true. I mean,
I know.
They could close with Enter Sandman or anything like that, but they close with that song.
Yep. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about Ride the Lightning. First, we're going to listen to some music so I can take a few sips of my whiskey. Let's talk about Ride the Lightning. This time we are not putting it up against Kill 'Em All. This was released in July 27th of 1984, again on Megaforce Records, but this time the album was recorded with the producer Flemming Rasmussen. So I think we should talk a bit about this. I think this is also, there's only so much shit you can, when you're going down a rabbit hole, it's not easy to touch on everything, but I felt like we need to give a little bit more of our discussion to the producer and we've discussed this many times, the how much producers can affect music, and we will definitely talk about that on Injustice for All. But let's talk a little bit about Mr. Flemming Rasmussen. He is the sound engineer, record producer, and owner and founder of Sweet Silence Studios in Copenhagen, Denmark. He's still alive and doing it, as far as I know and could research. So what do you guys think about the change? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that this was a major influence on how their sound changed and what happened with this album?
They're definitely getting away from Mustaine. I pulled up the track listing here, and interesting to note that Dave Mustaine has writing credits still on 2 of the songs on this album. Ride the Lightning, which you just heard, and also the Call of Cthulhu. Yep, you got it. But they are definitely kind of definitely on their way to becoming the Metallica that we know now. And gosh, I love this album. There isn't, I don't think this is one of those albums where I don't think I'd throw away any of the songs on this track list. Sailor, was this the first album you said you were introduced to them through?
This is my introduction to Metallica.
All right.
And I believe it was late 84, because I'm just going on my age and kind of the memory of it. This started everything for me, and it was because of, I've talked about this guy a million times. I really got to try to get him on the show one day. My best friend's older brother, lived 2 houses down from me, is responsible for all of my metal early knowledge and exposing me to all of this. So God bless Bernie. And I just was hooked.
Bernie.
Yeah, to Bernie. He's literally why we are sitting here right now.
Did you have a good weekend at his house?
I used to have lots of good weekends at his house, but that's another discussion.
Off the air.
I think he was my first kiss, too. I think so. Like my first real. I think he was. Anyway, who cares?
Bernie.
So yeah. Okay. So I think Fleming Rasmussen had a huge impact on their sound. And in my opinion, I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but I think he was pushing them to be technically better, with the risk of taking away the thrashness of their sound, for lack of a better word. But I think it's what needed to happen at the time. Let's just say that. Although we had the change from, now there's no Mustaine sound left, and it's Kirk. They're all phenomenal musicians, specifically fantastic writers, and to really see that in this album, they're so young. I mean, the talent that it takes. First of all, James Hetfield is an incredible poet. It took me years to understand the lyrics. Like, I would read them to memorize them so I could sing along, but I wasn't really, I was, you're young, like grasping what he was really talking about, and his, obsession with history and war, and his poetry is pretty fucking incredible, especially for such a young man at the time. And just, how tight they were as a band. And then there's Cliff. Cliff has a huge impact on the music. He actually has music theory training. He's actually a trained musician. And he's teaching them as they're going. And he's a bit older than them and has more experience. And you definitely hear that now. So I think those are all the elements that make this album, Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, if you talking about producers, though, I think this is a band that has been influenced by every producer they've ever had, whether good or bad. I don't want to jump into the future,
bad.
but
if you're influenced by every fucking producer you work with, that's bad.
Here's the difference, though. Here's the difference. If you equate it to a chef, and you have, Fleming, who has all these ingredients that he can see the picture in his mind, but he hasn't started making it yet, but he has all of these pieces to work with, and he can kind of take all the best parts of this and make something special out of it. Whereas later on, you have the finished product and someone comes and asks you to reinvent it or try to use what's done already to make something new. That's the difference. So I think it's not taking anything away from the later producers, but I think that they were already working with something that had already peaked with a finished product already.
Yeah.
That they were trying to
put their own sound to it.
Put their own sound to.
Yes.
And I think Fleming at the right time with his expertise and the work he had done already came in, and the ingredients were starting to come together, and he just had to turn the flame on the stove. That was it. And that's what it is right there. And this album, it's my first Metallica album. And I think I may have told the story. I recognized the album cover. I was at a garage sale. I had $2 to spend. My dad gave me $2. I was probably bad that day. I did something wrong. He only gave me $2 to spend. He's like, you can buy something, just here's $2. And I recognized the album cover in this just tray of cassettes that these people were selling, because my oldest brother, had the t-shirt, the Ride the Lightning t-shirt, which he had cut the sleeves out of. It was a thing, I guess.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. And I recognized the cover. So it was $1. They were selling these cassettes for $1. So I bought it. And I went home and I had this really old it wasn't even like a boombox. Like, I don't even know what you would call it, but it was just, I put the tape in, I pressed play, and that first melodic, intro comes on to Fight Fire with Fire. And I'm like, what in the hell is this? And then from there, it's just a roller coaster, and it completely changed my view of music forever. So my feelings about this album have not changed whatsoever. This is the first masterpiece. Yes.
I also, just real quick, want to just talk about, so there was a lot of controversy with this album as well, with the mixing and mastering. And so it's interesting how I think the band, I don't want to give too much. I mean, I want to give Fleming his due creds, because he definitely deserves them. But I also want to give the band credit that they were not happy with the plan for their mixing and mastering. And they stood up for themselves and said, yeah, no, that's not going to work out for us. And actually turned down a studio, a recorder, a label offer. So I think, there's a lot of things that are happening right now. The band's coming into its own. They're recognizing, their own success and their own vision. I wonder what would have happened if they would have stuck with Fleming for all of their albums. Man.
Might have had a little more bass in Injustice for All.
He had small hands. He had small hands in that, but it was mostly produced by Metallica.
Very small hands.
Very small hands, yeah, like T-Rex hands. But he's on the album credits. So.
James and Lars had the bigger hands.
Of course, yeah.
All right, Ed, what about you?
Oh, my views on this album have not changed at all. I still think it's a masterpiece. Fade to Black was this is their real first sort of ballady song, and it's just, I think it's just a beautiful piece. It's like I guess this is like foreshadowing the song One. I think it's that same type of writing, and I just love it. Creeping Death, this is another one of my favorite songs on this album. Creeping Death, Ride the Lightning. I I could listen to the song all day. I still think it's one of my favorite early Metallica albums. Yeah, really not much else to say that I haven't said before.
Well, I think that I mean, I don't think a lot has changed, with our reaction to this album and our opinion on this album. We chose this album in the battle because I think we weren't really looking at it, just as we've discussed, in the way we should have been. And I don't think this album goes up against any other album. I don't think you can put this album up against Master of Puppets. I think they're two completely and totally different. What was it? Master of Puppets? Is that what was the original joke?
Puppets. Yeah.
Puppets. Yes.
Puppets.
It came from my mispronunciation.
Puppets. So I kind of feel like this album belongs on its own shelf as well. I really don't feel like you can put this against Master of Puppets. I just don't.
I mean, you can, but
yeah. I mean, the albums are laid out almost exactly the same.
I don't know. All right.
You couldn't put Fade to Black against Sanitarium. You couldn't put Fight Fire with Fire against Battery.
No, hell no.
No?
No way.
You couldn't put Cthulhu against Orion.
No.
Okay.
No.
Or the thing that should not be.
To battle them against each other and then you lose Ride the Lightning, is that really what you want? No.
You don't lose anything.
Dude.
I could battle track for track with those two albums.
No. Nope.
No? All right.
Nope. Well, I mean, that's my opinion. If you guys are going to overrule me, you have to be a majority.
They all get gold stars.
All right. All right. I need a minute. Let's listen to some music and then we're going to talk about Master of not Puppets, but Puppets.
Master of the Puppets.
Or the Puppets. That's why I thought about it. I was like, was I the one that fucked it up last time?
Sounds like something my mom would say.
All right. It's time for Master of Puppets. Oh, God. It's never going to get old.
Nope.
Even though I forgot about it for a minute. Okay. This album was released on March 3rd of 1986. And now they're with Elektra Records. Again, recorded with producer Flemming Rasmussen. Yeah, man, this album. Whew. I think I said this in our first series, that this is the ultimate Metallica album for me. To me, this was their peak. This was their everything. This is all of it, everything. This encompasses 80s thrash. This is, if you have to tell an alien what American thrash metal is, this is the album you put in the thing that gets sucked up into the alien ship. Right here. Yeah. This is it. This is the dictionary definition of the best heavy metal album ever. Period. In my opinion. All right. So they're pretty fucking big at this point in their career, right? They're supporting Ozzy Osbourne, who was huge at the time. They're on the Billboard now, which was unfreaking believable back then. And this album was the first metal recording to be selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the National Recording Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Like I said, this is the album. All right. So I just feel like this album, I'm going to say it again, like you can't put this album, I mean, I understand what you guys are saying about putting this, song for song, but they are in their sweet spot. They have matured. They're in the place. They're in the groove. They've got it. They've figured it out. It's everything. How can you absolutely compare this to any other Metallica album? I don't understand.
Well, for me, my opinion on this album, I think, has changed.
Uh-oh.
I am starting to come around a little more to your way of thinking. After revisiting this, I think I don't think I gave this album its due as much as I should have. Well, I shouldn't say should have, because that was my feelings at the time, and my feelings at the time were valid.
Mm-hmm.
But my feelings have changed over the couple years since then, and I agree. I think that from a more objective, taking kind of what we were talking about earlier, our personal experiences with albums and feelings towards albums, trying to remove that as much as I can and be more objective, I do think that this probably would fit as their peak in that era as well. So yeah, I'm more in agreement with you now, definitely, than I was back then.
Can you imagine if it would have worked out that Geddy Lee would have produced this album?
Oh my God. That's hard to imagine.
Not back then.
Hard to imagine.
Not back then. Now it is, but not back then.
In my brain, it's hard to imagine what it would sound like, how it would be different if Geddy Lee had produced it.
Oh, I think it would have been very different. I think that I don't know. I always romanticize this shit, and I'm speculating because what the fuck do I know? But I can imagine Geddy Lee and Cliff like totally music nerding out together.
Oh my God,
right?
Oh, yeah.
They totally would have. Holy crap!
I think it would have been really fucking cool.
It would have been amazing. I'm sure.
So just for context, they're in their power windows period. Rush is at the time. So they are heavily into their progressive rock sound, which could have been really freaking cool. I mean, gosh, how do you as Metallica not go back to Geddy Lee at some point and be like, hey, remember when you were going to produce our album, but it was literally just tour schedules that didn't make it work? Let's do that now anyway. Well, it would be so cool. I don't know. I think that would have been amazing.
It'll be an interesting experiment, that's for sure.
I think so. Absolutely. Yeah. What about you, Matt?
There's not much more I can add to what I've said about this album. It breaks the bubble of just being a metal and thrash album. It is, to me, one of the greatest albums, period. The end. I'm sorry. I mean, you people can have You're Born in the USA, Master of Puppets is one of the best albums ever, period. It's a game changer of all game changers. One thing I will add, and I didn't think I could draw anything else from this album after listening to it ad nauseum over, what it'll be 25 years or so since I first heard this album. This is the first time that James lyrically leaves things open to interpretation for his listeners.
Good point.
You know, yeah. So, I mean, Master of Puppets. Is it about drugs? Is it about something that controls you? Is it about whatever demon you're facing? It doesn't have to be overtly what you think it is. It can be anything. And I think it plays to a lot of different aspects. The thing that should not be, what is it? Is it an ominous creature coming from the depths of the ocean? Or is it something that you're pushing down emotionally, psychologically, that you want to go away from? You know, sanitarium. You know, it leaves it to the imagination of the listener, and I think that's the first time that he really punched through that wall, which he does so very well. Even now, for all of the detractors out there of their new stuff, he still kind of does that very well.
I would agree.
This is the first time that he did that, and that speaks a lot to him as a songwriter. And I think that's the only thing I gleaned really from the last 3 years since the first time we recorded this, and I don't think anybody mentioned it the first time, is that with Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, it was a little bit more overt as to the subject matter. There's still some of that on here, but I think there's just that next level down of depth for the listener too. Atmospheric is a great word. Yes,
maturing as a writer.
Maturing as a writer, as a singer, as a musician, as a human. But I think they that's why I'm saying they found that place that he could still voice what he was trying to voice, but in an atmospheric way.
Yes.
I mean, in reviews, the words "precisely executed songs" were used. That's it. I mean, if I'm him, I'm like, okay, that's all I've ever needed to hear. Precisely executed songs. There's so the BBC music writer Eamon Stack said, quote, "At this stage of their careers, Metallica weren't even doing songs, they were telling stories. The compositions and arrangements benefited from Burton's classical training and understanding of harmony." I think that's what James needed, was the musicality to kind of, so it pushed the music to another level, but also gave him a sweeter spot to write into, I think, lyrically. So I totally agree with you, Matt.
Yep.
So I think this album deserves its own place because, I mean, it literally has its own place. It is its own place.
Well, I mean, when you're at the top, you're only looking down on everybody else. So, I mean, this album was the apex, which I feel it is the apex of what they did.
I agree.
Over 40 years, or almost 40 years now, I guess, of music. Goddamn. That's all I could say. You're looking down on everything else.
Yes. This is the apex. They're exactly where, I don't even think they're in a place where they ever imagined they could be. I don't think this is anything they could have ever fathomed as musicians, as young kids, as metalheads and thrashers and rockers. And then now as even well-formed artists, I still think this was mind-blowing for them and they didn't expect to be in this place. And that's where we're going to leave them for now, actually. So I'm going to play you guys another track while we take another sip of whiskey, and then we're going to talk about what to expect on our next episode, continuing our Metallica Them All series. All right. So I'm really glad once again that we went back to this. I'm really happy with our look back. I'm happy that we got to do this without the pressure of the battle. That we've been able to kind of look into these albums as their own unique entities. That makes me really happy and feel better about like a clean like end point to what we did years ago. So yeah, next up, what are we doing next up? We're doing Injustice for All, yes? No? We're doing Cliff.
Cliff
yeah, we are focusing on Cliff Burton and the Cliff Them All documentary. Is it called a documentary? Is that what it is? Basically?
I think it is.
Yeah, I believe so.
A documentary.
It depends on how you put the emphasis on the syllable.
I know. Tomato.
Damn, what a jerk.
I love my Midwestern brother.
It could also be it could be called a compilation as well. But I think it's fair to call it a documentary or documentary. Either way. All right, so that's what you can expect next time is we're going to do deep dive into Cliff's life and the amazing documentary compilation, whatever, of footage of Cliff. I haven't watched it in a long time. I can't wait to watch it again. I'm super excited. And that's it for tonight.
All right. Thank you, listeners, for listening and watching. You can follow us on Instagram at Metal Rock Whiskey and on Twitter at Metal Whiskey, at Metal Whiskey. Sorry, at Metal Whiskey on Twitter.
What?
At Metal Whiskey. That is without the rock on Twitter.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
Follow and subscribe, please, to our YouTube channel. If you're watching us now, there is no reason why you shouldn't have clicked on that bell that's in the bottom corner somewhere down here. Click on that bell to subscribe, and you will get every single notification every time we upload a new video or any new content. Yes, and you can find, of course, the three of us on social media. You can find me on Instagram at the Whiskey Obsessor. That is whiskey, save the E. Sailor.
I am Sailor Retro on most of the internets. That would be Twitter and the Grams. And you can find me as Sailor Guevara on a Facebook.
Feel free to plug your cocktail site too.
Oh, yeah. So thanks, Ed. So I've got a new website called sailorguevara.com or sailorguevaracocktails.com. And I'm doing virtual cocktail and spirits flight experiences. It's been super fun. I do them to support local bars and restaurants in the area, and I will be expanding that nationally very soon. So yeah, you get fun kit in the mail, and you get to hang out with me and a bunch of other people virtually, and we sip on stuff and talk about the history of it. And we listen to some live musicians, and let me tell you, live local musicians need the love desperately. Mm-hmm. And people have been amazing about tipping them, which makes me so happy. And I've partnered with an awesome, amazing like little gourmet deli that does individual charcuterie boards to go along. And I mean, let me tell you, we nerded out together so hard. So Ricky is a proprietor, and I was like, okay, well, here's the taste profiles for the first one we ever did, you know, of the whiskeys I'm going to be pouring, and I'd like to match cheeses with it. And all I had to do is give him the flavor, and he kept going, ooh, ooh, oh, and I saw him like writing stuff down. I was like, that's exactly the type of cheese I would match with it. So excited. So we're having a lot of fun. So yeah, just check out sailorguevara.com. Thanks, Ed.
Awesome. Okay, you're welcome. Go check it out, everyone. And if you happen to want to see what I'm doing, you can look at Urban Geek on Instagram. It's not nearly as cool as what Sailor's doing, but you know, it's there.
Yeah. Oh, and I should say that please check us out on Facebook as well. The Facebook group is now Metal Rock Whiskey.
Yep.
So please ask to
Revive.
join. Yes, it is live and breathing very well right now. So
Yeah.
please ask to join.
Yes. And so, listeners, if you love us, or even if you just like us, please, we ask you again, hit that subscribe button, give us a review. It really does matter to us. And of course, tune in a couple of weeks probably for the next episode of Metal Rock and Whiskey, where we will be back to revisit this subject and talk about Cliff.
And if you hate us, then I really want to hear it. We haven't gotten hate mail in a long time, friends.
Yeah.
Send it over and I will respond to you personally, not a bot, just me. And I'll say, you know what? That's fine. Your opinion matters. Or maybe I'll say F you, like every outro since day one of this podcast. Someone always get fucked off. Who's it going to be tonight? Let's see. How about fuck you people who take bass out of every fucking album?
Aha. Later, everyone.
Bye.
Adios. Bye.